Her name is not merely a name. It is a legend, a myth, a synonym for power, seduction, and tragedy. The last pharaoh of Egypt, Cleopatra VII. A woman who spoke 9 languages. A woman who commanded a fleet. A woman who declared herself the living embodiment of the goddess Isis. She threw down a challenge to Rome, the greatest empire the world had ever known, and seduced the 2 most powerful men of her age, Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. We know the story of her life. We know the story of her rule. We know the story of her death. In August of 30 BCE, as the legions of her sworn enemy, Octavian, breached the walls of her capital, Alexandria, she sealed herself within her own mausoleum. According to the legend, a legend penned by her Roman conquerors, she called for a basket of figs. Beneath the sweet fruit, an asp lay coiled. She pressed the serpent to her skin, a quiet and regal exit. It was the end of a dynasty, the end of an era. The death of Cleopatra marked the final breath of pharaonic Egypt and the birth of the Roman Empire. We believe we know everything, but this is an illusion. We do not know the one thing that matters most. Where is she? Where is her tomb? How could it be that the most famous, most documented woman in all of antiquity, buried, in the words of the Roman historians themselves, in a manner both royal and magnificent, simply vanished? For more than 2,000 years, her final resting place has remained the most coveted, the most prized, the most elusive puzzle in archaeology. The Great Pyramids of Giza still command the horizon. The golden mask of Tutankhamun was unearthed from the sands. But the tomb of Cleopatra has evaporated into history. Roman emperors searched for it. Arab caliphs searched for it. Napoleon's adventurers searched for it. Today, modern archaeologists, armed with the most advanced technology on Earth, continue the search. None have found it. This is more than mere failure, more than a lost grave. It is an anomaly, a statistical impossibility. It is either the perfect crime or the perfect, most brilliant plan. What if her tomb was never lost? What if it was hidden, concealed with such cunning, such audacity, that for 2 millennia, armies of scholars and soldiers have been looking in entirely the wrong place? We have been staring at the map, but failing to see the key. Until now. This is the story of an investigation that began not in the dust of the Egyptian desert, but in the quiet of a lawyer's office. It is the story of a discovery that does not simply point the way to a tomb, but fundamentally changes our understanding of what that tomb is. It is not merely a burial chamber. It is a cipher, a labyrinth. And the key has just been found. To find what was so masterfully hidden, we must first understand where the world has been looking. To solve the riddle of her disappearance, we must first confront the genius of the mind that engineered it, and accept that for a queen who lived as a goddess, the final monument would not be a place, but a legacy of perfect, impenetrable mystery. Our first witnesses are not allies, but the historians of the conqueror: Plutarch, Cassius Dio, Suetonius. All of them, writing a generation or 2 after the events, converge on one remarkable fact. The victor, the future Emperor Augustus, then known as Octavian, permitted Cleopatra a burial fit for a queen. He went further, honoring her final wish, to be interred beside Mark Antony. Was this a gesture of respect for their legendary love? It was not. Octavian was a man of cold calculation, a master of propaganda who had just concluded a brutal civil war. Cleopatra had been his supreme adversary, cast in his narratives as a decadent Eastern sorceress who had ensnared a noble Roman. By entombing them together, he was not honoring a romance. He was sealing a threat. The act was a declaration to Rome, "It is finished. The enemies are vanquished, locked together in a single grave. I am the victor." And so, a fact is established, confirmed by the Romans themselves. The tomb existed. But where? Again, the ancient witnesses are unanimous. She was laid to rest in her own mausoleum, a monumental structure she had commissioned in her lifetime, adjacent to her palace. Her palace stood in Alexandria, within the royal quarter known as the Bruchaion, the forbidden city of the ancient world. This was the exclusive district of the Ptolemies. Here stood the legendary lighthouse, one of the seven wonders. Here was the great library, the intellectual heart of a bygone world. And here, it was rumored, lay the body of Alexander the Great himself, preserved in a sarcophagus of honey. The path seemed simple. Find the palace, find the mausoleum, find the ruins of the Bruchaion, and you will find Cleopatra. There is, however, one problem. A gigantic, insurmountable problem. Ancient Alexandria is gone. It lies dead beneath the waves. On the 21st of July, in the year 365, as dawn broke, the earth convulsed. Off the coast of Crete, the seabed ruptured, unleashing one of the most powerful earthquakes ever recorded, its magnitude estimated today at over 8. The shock wave radiated across the Mediterranean, erasing cities in Greece, Italy, and Libya from existence. But the worst was reserved for Alexandria. Geological faults beneath the city shifted, and the ground itself sank by several meters. Then, a monster rose from the sea. The water first drew back from the shore, exposing the harbor floor in an ominous silence. It returned as a colossal wall, surging over the sea defenses and roaring into the city. An entire district, the very same royal quarter with its Ptolemaic palaces, the temples where Cleopatra prayed, and, it is believed, her tomb, was consumed. It slid forever into the sea. For 1,500 years, it became a ghost story, a phantom city lost to the depths. Until the 1990s and the arrival of one man, Franck Goddio. A French underwater archaeologist, he was no adventurer, but a scientist armed with bleeding-edge technology. His ship, the Princess Duda, was a floating laboratory. Goddio deployed instruments that bordered on science fiction. Highly sensitive proton magnetometers capable of detecting faint anomalies in the Earth's magnetic field. Anomalies caused by the presence of hidden stone structures buried in the seabed. The search was no longer a matter of myth, but of physics. The ocean floor held a memory, written in magnetic disturbances, waiting for the right eyes to read it. For beneath the silt and the silence of centuries, a lost world was beginning to speak. Side-scan sonar, charting the unseen contours of the seabed. Nuclear magnetic resonance, probing the depths. A methodical inch-by-inch scan of the Alexandria harbor floor commenced. And what was found would stagger the world. He found her. Lost Alexandria. It was an impossible revelation. There, directly beneath the keels of modern cargo ships, at a depth of just 6.8 meters, shrouded in a blanket of silt, lay the city of Cleopatra. The team, led by Franck Goddio, raised over 1,000 artifacts. Colossal 5-meter statues of pharaohs broke the surface. Black diorite sphinxes that once guarded a temple entrance stared out from the depths. Columns, remnants of mosaic floors. They even found Cleopatra's personal island palace, Antirodos. They were, quite literally, swimming through her history. They found the temple of Isis, the goddess with whom Cleopatra identified herself. They found everything. Everything but one. The tomb, the mausoleum. There were no traces. Not a single stone that could be identified with certainty as the final resting place of the last queen. How was this possible? Had the earthquakes and tsunamis been so absolute, so devastating, that they had erased her final monument to dust? Or had it never been there at all? Franck Godot had found Cleopatra's city, but her greatest secret remained at the bottom of the sea. An investigation 2,000 years in the making had reached a dead end, an impasse sealed by the concrete of modern Alexandria and the waters of the Mediterranean. For decades, the world of archaeology resigned itself to this truth. The tomb of Cleopatra was lost forever, either annihilated by the sea or buried beneath the foundations of a sprawling modern city where excavation was, in principle, impossible. The case was closed. Every article, every book, every documentary concluded on this tragic note. Until the most unexpected of players stepped onto the world stage. Her name was Kathleen Martinez, and she was not an archaeologist. She was a criminal lawyer from the Dominican Republic, a specialist in constitutional law. She held no claim to dusty excavations, but she possessed an obsession. Since her youth, she had been consumed by the story of Cleopatra. Not the Cleopatra of Hollywood film, but Cleopatra the strategist, Cleopatra the intellectual. For 14 years, from an office in Santo Domingo, she conducted her own private inquiry. She read every text ever written about the queen. She studied ancient languages. She looked at the case not as an archaeologist who searches for artifacts, but as a lawyer who searches for motive. She asked a simple, criminal question that somehow no one had asked before. Why would Cleopatra, one of the most intelligent, calculating women of her time, build her mausoleum in the most obvious place imaginable, right inside her own palace? She was not naive. She knew she was losing the war. She knew Octavian was coming for her. She knew he despised her. He had just destroyed her fleet, her army, her lover. He was taking her children to Rome in chains, to be paraded in his triumphal procession. The search was no longer for a place, but for a state of mind. A 2,000-year-old mystery, sealed not by stone and sea, but by a failure of imagination. To find the queen, one first had. For the Romans, the desecration of a tomb was the final act of war. They would smash the sarcophagus, shatter the effigy, and chisel the enemy's name from the stone itself. A practice they called damnatio memoriae, the condemnation of memory. To an Egyptian, who believed the afterlife was a tangible reality, this was a fate more terrifying than death. It was the promise of absolute oblivion. Could Cleopatra, a queen who believed herself to be the living incarnation of the goddess Isis, ever allow her body, and the body of her beloved Antony, to fall into the hands of such an enemy? To the analytical mind of Kathleen Martinez, the answer was a resounding no. It was illogical. It defied the woman's entire psychological profile. The dramatic suicide in the Alexandrian palace was a lure, a piece of theater. It was the perfect stage for a public death, the perfect scene for the conqueror Octavian to discover. but it was no place for eternal rest. She must have prepared something else, a secret contingency, a plan B. But where? Martinez returned again and again to the ancient texts of Plutarch. There she seized upon a detail that generations of historians had dismissed as mere poetic metaphor: Cleopatra's identification with Isis, and Antony's with the god Dionysus, whom the Greeks associated with Osiris, the husband of Isis. The legend of Osiris is the central myth of Egypt. Murdered by his jealous brother, his body was hacked into 14 pieces and scattered across the land. It was Isis, his loving wife, who painstakingly gathered the fragments and, using her divine magic, made him whole again. Their final resting place could not be just a tomb. It had to be a sanctuary, a hallowed ground where the myth of Isis and Osiris could be reenacted. A place where Cleopatra, as the new Isis, and Antony, as the new Osiris, could reunite in the next life and achieve immortality. This single realization changed everything. Martinez stopped searching near palaces. She began looking for the great temples of Isis and Osiris that existed in Cleopatra's time. And her gaze fell upon one point on the map, a location every other archaeologist had ignored. 50 kilometers west of Alexandria, Taposiris Magna, the great tomb of Osiris. The name alone was enough to make the heart beat faster. In antiquity, it was a major port city and a vital religious center. Its main feature, a massive, half-ruined temple dedicated to Osiris. According to one ancient legend, it was on this very spot that Isis found one of the 14 scattered pieces of her husband's body. The mythological connection was perfect. The site was known, its surface scratched by previous excavations, but it was never explored in depth. It was considered just one of hundreds of Ptolemaic temples, nothing special. It lacked the gilded grandeur of a Karnak or a Luxor. But Martinez was certain this was her prime suspect. In 2005, she sold her car, took out a loan, and traveled to Egypt. She walked into the office of the pharaoh of Egyptian archaeology, Dr. Zahi Hawass. At the time, he was the all-powerful head of the Supreme Council of Antiquities, a man who controlled every excavation in the country. He listened to her theory. He saw before him not a seasoned archaeologist, but a lawyer from the Dominican Republic, a woman with no field experience to her name. He saw only an outsider, armed with nothing more than an unshakable conviction, asking for permission to rewrite history. She arrived with a theory so audacious, it bordered on heresy, that for centuries, hundreds of scholars had been looking in the wrong place. The official response was, to put it mildly, skeptical. The answer was no. But she would not surrender. She returned, again and again. Something in her obsession, in the steel trap logic of her argument, began to cut through the doubt. Finally, he relented. She would have her chance, but it would be a cruel one. "You have 2 months," he declared. 1 digging season. "If you find nothing, you leave. Forever." For the archaeologist, it was an all-or-nothing wager. She assembled a small team of Egyptian workers. They began to dig and found nothing. Week bled into week. There was only dust, stone, and the unremarkable shards of forgotten pottery. The clock was ticking. 2 months were nearly gone. Desperation settled over the team. In his office, the director of antiquities was already preparing the paperwork to terminate the excavation. And then, they found it. Not a tomb, a head. A flawlessly preserved alabaster head. It was a sculpture of Cleopatra herself, her face framed by the famous melon hairstyle and crowned with a royal diadem. Nearby, another discovery. Coins. Dozens of bronze coins, each stamped with her profile, minted during her lifetime. It was irrefutable proof. Evidence that this temple was not merely active during her reign, it was profoundly important to her. A personal project. To find so many of her images in a single location could not be a coincidence. The director was stunned. He immediately extended the mission. The excavations would now continue year after year. The team pressed on, biting deeper into the bedrock. And the deeper they went, the more profound and unsettling their discoveries became. Outside the temple walls, they unearthed a vast necropolis, a city of the dead. They opened dozens of tombs, and what they found inside was a shock. There were mummies, but they were not royal. These were high-ranking officials, priestesses, military commanders, nearly 200 souls from the Greco-Roman period, and every single one of them was buried facing the temple. They had chosen to be interred here, to be near this place, to be near someone who lay within. It was as if they were a silent retinue, eternally accompanying their sovereign into the afterlife. Then came another stunning find. Mummies with tongues of gold, a rare and sacred burial practice. The ancient Egyptians believed a golden tongue would grant the deceased the power to speak in the underworld, to converse with Osiris, the god of the dead. The pieces were all falling into place. Taposiris Magna was not just a temple. It was a colossal funerary complex, the center of a powerful death cult, the perfect location for a secret tomb. The team had excavated the periphery and found the queen's court. But where was the queen herself? Logic dictated she must be at its heart, inside, in the most sacred, most protected sanctum, deep beneath the temple floor. They brought in ground-penetrating radar, a technology that could see through solid stone. They began to scan the temple, and the radar went wild. It revealed voids far below the bedrock. These were not natural fissures in the earth. They were man-made anomalies, structures of perfect geometric design. For every truth etched in stone, another lies waiting in the dark. A single, unwavering conviction had led them here, to the very threshold of a legend. The machines offered a glimpse of a hidden world, a blueprint of what might lie beneath. But technology can only reveal the shape of a mystery. It cannot give it a voice. That voice still echoes from a silence 2 millennia deep, a silence that may yet be broken. A network of shafts, tunnels, and one particularly large anomaly, a vast, echoing void. Perhaps, they hoped, a burial chamber. They began to drill, shaft after shaft, descending ever deeper into the unforgiving dark. 13 meters, 15 meters, and then they found it. In November of 2022, the world's media ignited. Headlines screamed a single electrifying claim. A tunnel to the tomb of Cleopatra had been found. The team, led by Kathleen Martinez, announced their discovery. But it was not a tomb. It was something far more incredible. Something that, in the opinion of engineers and historians, simply should not exist in Egypt. At a depth of 13 meters beneath the temple, they breached a wall. and found themselves standing at the mouth of a masterpiece. This was no simple passage. It was a corridor of impossible geometry, perfectly hewn from solid bedrock, 2 meters high, and disappearing into absolute blackness. They sent in drones. They went in themselves. The tunnel stretched for 1,305 meters, nearly a mile. It was a marvel of ancient engineering, but for what purpose? The team immediately saw a parallel. This tunnel was an almost exact replica of the Tunnel of Eupalinos, a legendary aqueduct on the Greek island of Samos, built 500 years before Cleopatra. Greek engineers had mastered the art of carving through mountains from opposite sides, meeting flawlessly in the middle. Cleopatra was Greek. She was a Ptolemy. She knew these technologies. But the tunnel on Samos was an aqueduct. It carried fresh water. And this one? A second shock awaited them. The tunnel was flooded. It was partially filled not with fresh water, but with Mediterranean seawater and silt, the very same water that swallowed the city of Alexandria. It was a direct, physical link to a known cataclysm. The same earthquake of 365 AD that devastated the royal quarter had struck here, too. It ruptured the tunnel, allowing the nearby sea to pour in. This was the stunning proof. It meant the tunnel was built before the disaster. It was built in the time of Cleopatra, or for her. This discovery changed everything. The temple of Taposiris Magna was not just a temple. It was the tip of an iceberg. The temple was the entrance, a public facade for priests and courtiers. The true complex was subterranean. This tunnel was not an aqueduct. It was a road, a secret passage, a path for souls. But where did it lead? For 1,305 meters, where could one travel in secret, deep beneath the earth? Working in inhuman conditions, wading through mud and history, Martinez's team followed the path. They found artifacts, ceramics, statues of Isis, coins, evidence that this passage was once alive with activity. And it led them to the edge, to a precipice. The tunnel opened into a new, unknown region. Radar scans conducted around the passage and at its termination point revealed yet more anomalies, more hidden structures buried in the rock. They had not found the final resting place of a queen. They had found the beginning of a journey. The tunnel was not the answer, but a question carved in stone, stretching for nearly a mile. A question that leads only deeper into the earth and further into the mysteries of a world we thought we knew. Beneath the sands of Egypt lies not a temple, but something else entirely. A complex of unknown, flooded chambers and deep, forbidding shafts. One plunges vertically into the earth, a sheer drop of nearly 100 feet. This was not a place of worship. It was a fortress, a bunker, a tomb engineered with a single purpose: to never be found. This is what truly stunned the researchers. It wasn't the promise of gold or a royal sarcophagus. It was the engineering, the cold, calculated genius of the design. Cleopatra, anticipating the desecration of her grand mausoleum in Alexandria, conceived of a final, secret gambit. It was not merely a tomb, but a subterranean labyrinth. She used the hallowed Temple of Osiris as a facade, a false door to conceal a tunnel bored deep into the bedrock, a passage leading to an isolated, rock-hewn vault designed to outlast empires. The irony is that her brilliant plan failed, not at the hands of man, but by the whim of nature. The very earthquake that swallowed her public tomb in Alexandria also fractured the earth here, flooding her true, secret resting place. She had hidden it so well that the world itself became its keeper. But now, we have the map. This tunnel is not a dead end. It is an arrow, pointing directly to its target. Archaeologist Kathleen Martinez has not found the tomb of Cleopatra. She has found the door. She has rediscovered a path concealed for 2,000 years, and she stands at its threshold. The investigation is not over. It is just beginning. At this moment, in Egypt, Martinez's team and Egyptian authorities are preparing submersible drones. They are preparing to descend into that flooded 100-foot shaft. They are preparing to breach the anomaly, the void detected by radar, and gaze upon what lies within. What will they find in the deep? An untouched burial chamber holding the twin sarcophagi of Cleopatra and Mark Antony, surrounded by treasures that would stagger the imagination. Or will they find something far more chilling? An empty room, a tomb that was found but not by us, a tomb found by the Romans. What if her great rival, Octavian, deciphered her final secret? He was no fool. What if he understood the Alexandria mausoleum was a decoy? What if he came here, to Taposiris Magna, in secret? What if he took their bodies, destroyed them, and erased their memory from the stone? Then, sealing the tunnel forever, leaving behind only this hollow temple as a final, silent insult. We stand on the precipice of either the greatest discovery in archaeological history or its most profound disappointment. This tunnel is either the key that unlocks the legend, or it is the last, masterful deception of a queen who would not be conquered, even by time itself. The answer awaits in the silence and the dark, where a story has been held, sealed and submerged for 2 millennia.